Hey guys, me again. Welcome to the second meeting of the Montrealites book club. And as promised, we're going to be looking at Knut Hamsun's Hunger. Okay, what can I say about this book? Well, for one, it's amazing. Everyone should have read or should read this book. Just kidding. Well, it really is a great book, but it's not an easy book to read by any measure. Like the name suggests, it's very much the story of a young man starving to death. Now, to give you some background on Knut Hamsun, he was born in 1859 in Norway. He had a very illustrious career, 70 years of being extremely prolific, published hundreds of novels, pamphlets, poems, short stories, you name it. He was kind of doing it. Now, this book came out in 1890, and it's a semi-autobiographical account of, I guess his own experience as a young man. But now, keep in mind, in 1890, no one else had done anything like this. No one else was doing, this was before Kafka came along and started doing his whole existential thing, and before Camus was doing absurdity and nihilism, all of these modern philosophical perspectives. Hamsun was kind of doing it before anyone else, and pretty much doing it the way that it would be done for the next up until present day, one of the reasons I decided to start with Hamsun in our discussion in the series is because, when even in a discussion of modern literature, Hamsun was really a precursor. Hamsun, like I said, was pretty much inventing this stuff as he was going along in the 1800s. I'm not sure if you have an idea of what life in the 1800s would have looked like in a small town in Norway, but safe to say it was pretty conservative. I mean, religion was still a huge influence on pretty much everyone's lives. Their high moral standards, or if you want to call it high, very just a lot more conservative. So a book like this, which is very much radical in its approach and in its subject matter, you should realize like how significant this was for its time and how new it was, how revolutionary it was. The list of writers that Hamsun has affected. Just to name a few, Thomas Mann, Franz Kafka, Gorky, Henry Miller, Hermann Hesse, Ernest Hemingway, Jack Kerouac, and that's just to name a few. Another thing is that all the writers we're going to be talking about were actually, very much indirectly, directly, in most cases, affected or influenced by Hamsun, so I thought it would be a good place to start. Okay, so for the style of the actual narrative, the novel, so like I say, it's about a young man. He lives in 19th century Oslo. He's pretty much completely alone and destitute in the city. He is a writer, but he can't get a job. He has sold some of his work. We never get to read his work, but from what we know, he's quite a capable young man in terms of his craft, in terms of his writing. He, always talking. The one thing he does always make sure to have is some pencils and paper so he can work. He won't have money for food or shelter or clothing, but that is something that he does throughout the novel. And even from the perspective of a Bildungsroman, or the perspective of a young artist, it's a common stylistic approach in modern literature. Hamsun was doing that too. So what we get is you get an account of this young man starving to death, no friends, no money, no family, just he essentially spends his day wandering around, hallucinating, in a rhapsodic state, doing outrageous things, following people in crowds, falling in love, with beautiful faces that he sees, young women. But the thing about this book is, and stylistically, what set Hamsun apart and really made him such a special writer, was that you would expect a novel with such content matter, with such subject matter, a story about a person starving to death. You would expect that it would be really bleak, heavy-handed, melancholy. How else would you approach such a scenario, such an event? But that's where Hamsun really defied convention, defied even logic, defied whatever you want to call it, because he was described as a neo-romantic. He rejected realism and naturalism, conventions, stylistic conventions, aesthetic conventions that very much became a part of the landscape in the 20th century. So he gives us this, this account of events. It's written, by the way, in a first-person stream of consciousness narrative style. So you really know, you really get to know what's going on inside the character's head. You get to know what he's thinking, what he's feeling, how hungry he is. It's very, very vivid, it's very real, it's very visceral. That's why, I'd say it's a hard novel to read, because you can't really write about such stuff or read about such things and not be affected. But so like I said, Hamsun was, he didn't believe in realism or naturalism, and by that I mean, so you get this account of a young man starving to death, but it's very whimsical, it's very lighthearted. The young man, despite his terrible situation, he doesn't break the law, he doesn't deviate, he does struggle with some of the choices he must make, just because he is still living in a very Christian society, and they kind of, I guess, thought about things a bit differently back then, all over the place, regardless of religion. He does struggle with certain choices that he has to make, or certain things that he does, kind of, he has his conscience that he must deal with. But ultimately, it's a very just beautiful, tender, and honest reflection of this young artist's, this young writer's life. Completely isolated, and the things he goes through. The irony of it, the lightheartedness and sense of whimsy in this book is really what sets it apart. Because otherwise, it would be very, very much heavy going, and doubtfully as successful. Obviously, he has, this is just one of his many really well-known and well-claimed books. Other examples are The Wanderer, The Woman at the Pump, The Growth of the Soil, Mysteries, Victoria. These are all great books, and not very easy to come by, to be honest. If you can find them, snatch them up. So yeah, that's my take on Hunger. If I had to rate this book, I don't know. I guess I'd give it a perfect score, because considering its time, considering from a historical perspective, everything that's going on in this novel, the ideas that Hamsun's working with, before anyone else, it's pretty much a perfect book. Very, very effective. Very effective. You don't walk away from this indifferent. Let's put it that way. I have yet to meet a person that was. So, my recommendation to you is that you find a copy of this book and eat it up. You will be hungry for more Hamsun. That's for sure. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, if you've read the book, if you think it sounds interesting, something you would be interested in reading. And as always, leave the comments below. Rate, subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. Until next time, guys, keep reading and be good.